Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a concept called the architecture of life. It's actually an ancient structured blueprint for living, but the source text positions it as the ultimate cure for a very modern problem: burnout. You know that feeling, right? Like you're stuck on a treadmill, waking up every single morning trying to invent your entire life philosophy from scratch. Well, if that hits home for you, you're going to find this breakdown incredibly valuable. Are you just totally exhausted by the chaotic experimental field of your own mind? Our source points out this incredibly universal problem. It's that absolute bone-deep exhaustion that comes from our own indecision, our restless ego, and the massive pressure to just figure everything out all the time. It is a chaotic experiment, and honestly, it leaves most of us feeling completely drained. So, to solve this deep exhaustion, the text introduces a brilliant metaphor: the architecture of life. Think about it like building a house. If your foundation isn't solid, the whole structure ends up crooked, right? The source explains that we have to build a solid foundation, layer by layer, so our lives literally don't collapse into disorder the second the world pushes against us.
The text breaks this architecture down into 4 sequential steps. First up is correcting faith, which gives you direction. Once you've got that, you need righteous action. That's the movement turning your belief into reality. Then comes sincerity, or purity, making sure your motives aren't just for show. And finally, step 4, the Sunnah, which brings balance.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how the text zooms way in on that 4th step: finding the middle path. It frames this concept of the Sunnah not as some dusty historical artifact or an abstract theological idea, but as a highly effective practical tool. It's a way to find that elusive middle path right in the middle of our extreme everyday lives. So let's look at what that actually means in practice. The source defines the Sunnah as a way of living. That means measure, balance, protection from excess, and living in accordance with human nature. The absolute key here is that it's not some unattainable, mystical, spiritual state meant only for a chosen few. No, it's a practical, ready-made psychological safeguard. And boy, do we desperately need that safeguard because of our natural human extremes. The text argues that we humans have a huge tendency to swing like a pendulum. On one side, you've got laxity, just loosening completely, maybe completely immersing yourself in the material world. But then on the other side is exaggeration, overburdening yourself with impossible standards, or totally withdrawing from life. Honestly, both are massive traps. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful realization from the text. Psychologically, the middle path is the most sustainable. It reminds us that excess, no matter which direction you swing, is going to exhaust you. Chasing those extremes burns us out and totally depletes our reserves. But finding that measured, balanced center, that is what actually sustains your energy for the long haul. Let's pivot slightly and look at how applying this balance works in real life. The source refers to this as the psychology of measure. It's this beautiful idea that having a set measure actively creates what they call mental economy. And honestly, if you are trying to navigate a crazy, busy modern life right now, mental economy is exactly what you need to stop feeling so overwhelmed. Here's how you tangibly get that mental economy: by setting daily measures. The source highlights putting a measure on how much we eat, how much we speak, our moments of worship, and even our sleep. Just think about decision fatigue for a second. By applying a simple, structured measure to these basic, everyday routines, the number of decisions you actually have to make plummets. Your energy is preserved, and your soul just stops scattering in 100 different directions. So you're probably wondering, how many complicated new life-hacking systems do you need to invent to achieve this? 0. Literally 0. That's the exact number of new systems you have to construct yourself. The text makes it clear that this centuries-tested path removes the massive burden of having to figure it all out from scratch. You don't need to be the architect of a brand new lifestyle. You just lean into a framework that's already proven to work. Okay, next we're examining how this framework works outwardly, not just inside our own heads. It's not only about internal peace. The source explains that this approach actively reduces our daily social tension and interpersonal friction. It's all about easing the social burden. Listen to this insight from the text. Half of society is exhausted by communication breakdowns. If you've ever felt completely drained by social interactions or office drama, the text suggests there's a specific culprit. It's usually driven by our heaviest burden, our own sense of importance. Basically, our big egos make us fragile, and that fragility is what leads to so much exhausting conflict. So what's the fix? Well, the Sunnah teaches profound humility through these really small, incredibly ordinary acts. We're talking about greeting others warmly, simply smiling, choosing to stay silent when you're angry, or just covering someone else's faults. Even things like visiting people and giving gifts. The text beautifully points out that these actions wonderfully diminish our ego, and as the ego shrinks, our fragility decreases, and our inner peace goes way up. It is a direct cause and effect relationship. As we build toward the end of this explainer, we really need to debunk a super common misconception. The text calls it walking firmly, not flying. You know, people so often romanticize spirituality. They make it overly complicated, always seeking these lofty mystical states or chasing miracles, and in the process, they completely disconnect from real, messy, everyday life.
Instead, the source models a completely livable reality. Look at the prophet. He was married. He engaged in trade. He struggled, he laughed, and he wept. He lived entirely within life. This way of living proves that true religion, or any true spiritual path, is supposed to be deeply embedded in real life, not totally separated from it. There's work, but not to the point of worshiping your job. There's love, but without turning it into an idol.
And that perfectly illustrates the overarching formula we've been unpacking today. What is livable becomes sustainable, and what is sustainable becomes lasting, because this middle path is actually livable and deliberately avoids all those crazy extremes. It creates an inner security that truly lasts. It is not asking you to be superhuman, it's just asking you to be a balanced human. I absolutely love this closing thought from the text because it grounds everything we've talked about. The issue is not to fly, the issue is to walk, but to walk firmly. Think about that. A meaningful, peaceful life doesn't require chasing miracles or inventing complex new productivity systems to elevate yourself above reality. It simply requires taking solid, balanced, measured steps right where you currently are.
Which brings us to our final thought. How are you going to apply this measure to your own daily routine? Whether it's in how much you eat, how much you speak, or how you deal with the people around you, I'll leave you with that provocative question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. I really hope you find your own mental economy on solid ground, totally free from the exhaustion of extremes. Keep walking firmly, and thanks so much for joining us today.